What's up, Rebels? Today, we're going to discuss the underground cult nobody is talking about.
Yeah, from the Diddy trial to the Tate brothers to the Epstein case, public reaction has been filled with outrage, confusion, and one dangerous assumption that if someone stays, it must be their choice.
What's up? I'm Brianna.
And I'm Brandon.
And we're the directors at Red Light Rebellion, a nonprofit focused on stopping sex trafficking before it starts through awareness and prevention.
Yeah, and for the last 15 years, we've trained over tens of thousands of students, parents, schools, and churches, and worked alongside survivors, undercover detectives, tech companies, aftercare programs, and NGOs from all around the world.
But the reality is this: the psychological manipulation used in sex trafficking mirrors the brainwashing used in cults. Victims aren't just controlled, they're conditioned. Their sense of safety, loyalty, and identity is deliberately rewired.
Yeah, and so if you don't understand how that psychological control works, you won't recognize when it's happening to you or someone you love. So we actually talked with Danny Pintner, a powerhouse lawyer who specializes in cases like this. She's currently representing one of the victims of Andrew Tate and works along one of Epstein's survivors as well.
And she's going to talk about the cult-like dynamics of sex trafficking that everyone is missing and is making families more vulnerable to sex trafficking.
As the Diddy and Andrew Tate case have been percolating, I've been kind of realizing is cults, right? We were talking about domestic violence, but like if we think about cults, everybody, I mean, we have in America fascination with cults. I mean, understandably, but
there's so many like true crime cult things that like are online. Yeah.
Well, it's mystifying and it's terrifying and it's fascinating to see people hurt themselves because that's what it is, right? We don't go back and think of like Jones Day and be like, well, they drank the Kool-Aid. They wanted the Kool-Aid. We understand that they were manipulated and under coercive control, that they were brainwashed. I mean, I don't think, and you know, there's the one woman from Jones Day, I think I'm getting it right. I think I'm talking about the right cult, who's still alive today and still says that he was great. Like he didn't hurt anybody, everybody, you know, so, but no one would listen to her because I think there was a recent documentary. And everyone listening is just fascinated because they know he was bad, right? They know that cult leader was bad. Jim Jones, whatever it is. They know he was bad, but so they're understanding there's a disconnect here, that despite the fact that this woman and this entire community was abused by this cult leader, she's denying that and like loves this cult leader. So because of all of the education, you know, we have all these documentaries, we see the experts talk about what brainwashing is like and cult dynamics are like, right? Reinforcement of the group dynamic, like the group actually starts enforcing the cult leaders' rules, and so that they're actually enforcing the rules against each other. And, you know, they just can't even see up from down anymore. And it's isolation, right? Like because they're all in this community, it's all in this like loop of reinforcement. They like forget what like the outside world thinks and what's normal and all that.
Wait, were you just describing what victims of sex trafficking go through in that?
Exactly.
Because honestly, I mean,
that's exactly it.
Like you're saying, the repeated pattern of isolating and brainwashing and using the group to facilitate that brainwashing as well too.
Because that group dynamic in trafficking is really, really powerful.
The family. They always call it a family. Right. We're doing it for the family. We're a family. We're in this together. We're doing it for and for a lot of victims, what people don't realize is if you have a victim whose family was abusive to them, maybe even sexually abusive to them, to their child, they're like, well, my own family treated me like this. So you're saying he's so bad. I mean, who doesn't treat people like they don't have no other experience. And they're like, he at least does this for me, or he at least builds me up sometimes, or he at least, you know, we're in this together. I have this community. And truly the women, you know, there's always this intentional, you know, they usually all live together in close proximity, right? There's this isolation from everyone else is a square, right? That's like, they have all this terminology. Like if you're outside the life, you're outside the group, you're squared, you can't trust the squares, blah, blah, blah. We're better than them, right? There's an identity that gets reinforced. And then there's a hierarchy. There's always almost always, I don't think I've ever seen a trafficking ring where there wasn't some strictly enforced hierarchy. And you want to move up in the hierarchy because you get less punishment. But the next thing you know, those women are punishing each other. The trafficker doesn't even have to be there because he knows his like rules are going to be enforced. And that is exactly like cult dynamics. But we have a disconnect when it comes to trafficking.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pretty common knowledge that that's how gangs work. And even though there is like gang affiliated sex trafficking, like it's not all gangs that are engaging in trafficking and exploitation. And yet there's like, I've always been very familiar with the hierarchy in gangs of like, hey, you've got to like earn your way up. And it is like a cult. And I even remember in the aftercare program, one girl bragging about how her pimp like liked her the best because one of the girls had called her a bad name and he like beat her with like the end of his gun and has like, so like proof that he like loves me more. And it was interesting because the girls that have been out of the life longer, they're kind of looking at her and they're like, honey, like you'll see different, you know, like, you know, like they had kind of come far enough along to understand what that is. But like those dynamics are so powerful, like, and that's brainwashing. It's psychological warfare. These traffickers are doing it intentionally. And I think that's a misconception that these things happen by accident. And yet we know even like the literature in psychology, like there's 11 main ways to establish a trauma bond in someone. And every single story of trafficking that I'm personally aware of, like I've been able to identify at least 7 in each of those stories. And so it's like, how much more are these trauma bonds and psychological warfare like happening? And so I'll even that to the conversation of like there is no perfect victim, and it takes years of counseling and therapy and healing to actually begin to break all of those bonds and that psychological warfare. So there is so much here that Danny hit on, but ultimately what it comes down to is that grooming is psychological warfare, and sex trafficking way more often than not starts in the context of relationship before exploitation. And that connection between sex trafficking and cult, I thought was fascinating.
So much, because it really like it just hits on all of the how people gather and trust and connection and
relationship, what people are looking for. Absolutely. So I actually looked up the Jim Jones cult because I wasn't as familiar with it when Danny mentioned it. Guys, this guy was crazy. He was the leader of the People's Temple cult, known for its tragic mass murder suicide in 1978, where over 900 members died after being coerced to drink a cyanide-laced
this is the Kool-Aid
beverage. Yes. 900 people. And there's a lady still alive that was a part of it that is like, oh yeah, he was like a great guy. That's insane.
Wow. Well, I think it goes to show too that just how effective this is. Like
psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that's missing, that makes us vulnerable to sex trafficking, that makes our kids vulnerable to sex trafficking, young people vulnerable to sex trafficking, is we think it's the snatch and grab. We think it's the kidnapping. We think it's taken, but it's actually the psychological warfare. It's this grooming process that happens. And what happens is like these pimps and traffickers, they're pretending to love this young person and want what's best for them. They're making promises of how they can help them through the hard times they're going through and the challenges they're facing and the dreams and the goals and the aspirations that they have in life. And so this young person genuinely believes this person loves them and they care for them. And then they love that person in response and they care for that person in response.
Yeah. And it's like, who doesn't want someone rooting for them? Who doesn't want someone that's like supporting, encouraging them? And that's where I think it's what's so insidious about this is that it's not an accident. Pimps and traffickers are doing this on purpose. Predators are doing these things on purpose for a result of gaining power over that person.
Yes, over someone.
In the same way that like these cult leaders have, which is so insane.
Which I actually heard one time that pimp stands for power in manipulating people. Which is insane. And like Danny talked about even like the language that's in the life and part of the game. She talks about like if you're square, you're like not cool. Like in the classrooms, when we're talking to students about how to stay safe from sex trafficking, one of the warning signs that we talk about, one of the psychological warfare methods that we talk about is language. Like female victims that belong to the same male pimp are forced to call each other wifey, wife-in-law, sister-in-law. The pimp makes them call him daddy. They're a family. And like students will like giggle and like laugh about it because it like sounds weird. But it's all part of that psychological warfare, using terms that should signify love, loyalty, and affection in a situation where it's just not appropriate. And it's really fascinating because as we've dived into different parts of like psychology and different research, I've actually found that like the research psychologically is very well established on these things. So I actually read a book called The Betrayal Bond by Patrick Carnes. This is actually in the context of those that have experienced like sexual betrayal by their partner, whether it's like through pornography or infidelity or whatever it is. And Patrick Carnes is like the forefront researcher on these things. And he actually, I think he coined the term sex addiction. And I also think he may have coined the term betrayal bond.
Wow, what a great thing to be known for. The guy that pioneered sex addiction.
No, the term.
yeah, the term. What a good guy.
What a good guy. So he is the forefront like researcher on these things. And And this book is fascinating. I actually read it as part of a therapy process that I was going through. And really the essence of this is when you love and trust someone with everything that you are, and they do such horrific things to you, they betray you in any kind of way, which happens in trafficking. Like they think that their trafficker loves them. It's not only until later that they find out like what the trafficker actually wants them to do. It is such a painful experience, is that the brain and the body goes into survival mode and will sometimes actually bond with the abuser. This is known as trauma bonding or Stockholm syndrome or betrayal bonds. And it's actually a form of relational PTSD that can be as severe as like soldiers that have experienced warfare.
That's crazy though, because that's the top level of PTSD, right?
Absolutely. And he talks about 4 different types of betrayal in his book. The betrayal of seduction, this one I've seen so many times in sex trafficking. It's characterized by high warmth, low intention. So the trafficker is like super, hey, I love you and I want what's best for you and we can have a life together and we can do this, that, and the other, but low intention, not being specific on their commitment to the other person, leads to deception and exploitive relationships. Wow. Betrayal by terror utilizes fear and intimidation to maintain control. That's force, fraud, and coercion in sex trafficking, often seen in abusive relationships and cult-like dynamics.
Man,
like, it's
he
all
already
here.
Called it. Man, how old is this book?
Actually, I don't know. I should look at that. But he's like had this research for a long, like this is established psychological research. And it like, I read this and it's for those that have been like sexually betrayed by their partners. And I was like, this is sex trafficking. This is everything that I've researched for the last 17 years of my life. It's all sex trafficking. He even talks about the 11 things that actually strengthen betrayal bonds. And in every single situation of sex trafficking that I personally know.
11 things that make betrayal bonds stronger.
Yes, those trauma bonds
worse
stronger.
For people.
Yes. And every single situation of sex trafficking I'm personally aware of, or like I know like the full story, like I know the survivor in the situation, I've identified at least like 7 of these. And you only need one in order to be able to like establish a trauma bond. And so like the repetitive cycles of abuse, that's like the abuse cycle where you actually have a honeymoon phase where like it feels good and like everything seems right until something bad happens. And then it kind of like keeps going cycle after cycle. The intensity mistaken for intimacy, guys. This is so many romance novels, so many rom-coms. This intensity mistaken for intimacy, where it's like, man, like we fight and it's like really bad, but then we make up and it's the best ever. Like you see that where people are actually proud of that dynamic. And it's
what's that Eminem and Rihanna music video?
Yes, it's exactly that song. Yes, it's intensity mistaken for intimacy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The like super high highs and super low lows.
Oh yeah, like I can't remember. Like I love the way you hurt me or something.
I love the way you lie.
I love the way you lie.
I don't even remember. We should probably look it up.
Yeah. But then you've got trauma, childhood trauma, history of abuse, even role switching of the victims and victimizers, where something will happen and the abuser will say like to the victim, like, hey, you messed up and now you put me in this situation. I can't believe you do that. Now I have to do X, Y, Z. And do you know how much that hurt me? And like, how could you do this to me? And it's like, you're supposed
sneaky.
to get, oh my gosh.
That's
so sneaky. And it's like, you were supposed to make this much money so that we could do X, Y, Z, and we need this for this, that, and the other. Like, how could you put me in this situation? And it's the role reversal. And guys, this is like, when you compound all of this stuff on top of each other, like it is absolutely horrific. And so it's no wonder that victims will be being exploited by someone, get out of that situation, and sometimes even go back to their like trafficker. We see this in abusive relationships and domestic violence, where it takes about an average of 7 times of trying to leave before the person's actually ready to leave their abuser. And so we're so passionate about talking about this dynamic because this is the part that's missing that makes us so vulnerable to sex trafficking, and our kids and young people so vulnerable to sex trafficking because we think it's a snatch and grab. We don't realize how much these predators are actually targeting and grooming young people to mess with their heads.
And it's so intentional too. Like no one becomes a predator on accident. There's intentional choices that lead there. I think people's stories can get hijacked by things that turn them into a predator, but ultimately they're still the ones making the decisions to become that type of person. And so that's why like people that are abusers, that are predators, that are sex traffickers, like they end up in the situations of trust for a reason. They didn't get there on accident. They decided to be there because they're trying to exploit others. That's what's so crazy about this. Like it's always the people that are in those positions of trust that you wouldn't necessarily expect. That's the common theme. It's like, oh, we would never expect that it was like, I didn't think it would have been my neighbor that was a bad dad exploiting his kids. I didn't think that it was a nice, sweet couple at a church that was abusing kids that I care about. Like, I didn't think one of my friends from high school would have been busted for soliciting a minor online, but all these things happen. And when we understand how grooming works and how this grooming process is psychological warfare, it gives us an insight of how to not only protect our kids, but really sniff out these people that are unsafe for our communities.
Absolutely. And so when we understand that grooming is psychological warfare, it totally shifts our understanding of sex trafficking, because we think it's a snatch and grab. We think it's kidnapping. We think that like we would know if it's the bad guy. Like I've had friends that were groomed by their parents, their friends' parents. Like I know people that were groomed and exploited by family members, and it's just the people that you wouldn't think. And so when we understand what grooming looks like, that's when we can actually recognize, hey, someone is not a good person. Like this is a dangerous person. It's not always sex trafficking, but sex trafficking literally, like I've read that book, The Betrayal Bonds. I've read so many other stories like from cults and gang dynamics and even abusive relationships. And every single time after researching sex trafficking for the last 15 years of my life, 17 years of my life, after researching all of that, I read every single one and I learn about all those dynamics. I'm like, oh, this is all the same. This is exactly what pimps and traffickers do. Like it's the method is the same, but we have all these misconceptions about how it happens. And so we actually miss it. And that's the dangerous part. But this isn't all that complicated actually to understand. Traffickers use all the same methods that every other predator uses. It's called grooming. And if we can understand grooming, then we can actually protect ourselves and the kids in our lives.
Yeah, which is why we created our free Red Flags program. And it's an online course that helps parents and the safe adults in kids' lives understand this kind of psychological warfare and grooming methods that traffickers use to exploit kids.
And so go ahead, hop on here. It's right on our website or like a link right underneath this video. And you can go ahead, sign up. It'll give you instant access to the program. And you're actually going to be able to learn and find out exactly what grooming looks like so that we can keep ourselves safe and keep our kids safe.
We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.